So in 1993, Sean Combs, aka Puff, aka P. Diddy, we can keep going, is fired from Uptown Records, where Biggie is signed by him. And according to Andre Harrell, who's the one who fired him, the distributor did not want to release Biggie's album. They felt like it was too graphic, but he said it was less like a firing and more of like a redirection. Basically, he was saying, we can't do this for you, but you can make it on your own doing it. But of course, this was a huge concern for Biggie because Puff was the one who brought him into the record label and was really invested in him. So at this point, apparently, Biggie was about to go back on the streets and start dealing again, and Puff actually convinced him to not do that and to stick with him a little bit longer. And he said that he specifically told him that if he went back out on the streets, he'd end up in jail or dead, and that wouldn't be helpful to his children. But if he just stuck with him a little bit longer, he would make sure that it happened for him. And he did. So at that point, Sean Combs decides that he's going to make his own record label, Bad Boy Records. I'm just going to cover up the middle finger right here. But anyways, Biggie, of course, followed Puff to Bad Boy Records. He had helped him out until this point. Biggie really trusted him. But unfortunately, now he's at a tiny label that's just starting out, even though Sean Combs is obviously capable. And in that scenario is when Tupac and Biggie first meet in LA in 1993. Supposedly, Biggie was introduced by a dealer who knew them both. Some say at a party, some say at the set of Poetic Justice. Either way, a party definitely happened, and we have an account of it. So according to the intern who was at this party, supposedly, they were all smoking together, and then Tupac comes out with this bag that has a bunch of firearms in it. So they're all getting these firearms out and running around the backyard with them. And thankfully, there were no bullets in these, but still seems pretty terrifying. And after that, apparently, Tupac was cooking for them, and they were all talking, and that is how they became friends. And supposedly, at the end of this night, Tupac gave Biggie a bottle of Hennessy, kind of as a, I like you and we all liked you gift. And from then on, whenever they were in each other's cities, they would visit each other, and they really were good friends. And supposedly, Biggie really saw Tupac as a mentor, even though he was only a little bit older than him, but he was much more established in his career at that point. Then in September 1993, Biggie starts dating Lil' Kim. And yes, he was still with Jan Jackson, the mother of his child, at this point. There's a little overlap, but it's nothing compared to what we're going to get later on. It is interesting that they have like a mentor relationship with each other, but he's only 2 years older. He was 21 at the time they met, and she was 19, or when they started dating at least. And she did say later on that their relationship could be pretty turbulent, sometimes even violent, but they really loved each other, and they pretty much dated off and on up until the time that he died. In October of 1993, Biggie broke it off with Jan Jackson, who was his longtime girlfriend and mother of his child. And apparently she kept trying to revive the relationship after that, but he wasn't interested. I think we know why he wasn't interested. October 24th, 1993 was the Budweiser Superfest at Madison Square Garden, and both Biggie and Tupac did freestyles there together. Then on October 31st of 1993, Tupac shoots 2 off-duty cops in Atlanta. And he was arrested for this, but the charges were ultimately dropped. The original story given by the 2 cops was that they were crossing the street and Tupac almost hit them with his car, and then they got mad at that, and Tupac got out and shot them. Tupac said, though, that the cops were harassing a black man and he intervened. The charges ended up being dropped, though, because it was found that the cops actually did initiate the incident. And not only that, but apparently they had been drinking and they threatened Tupac with a firearm that was actually from a drug bust. It was evidence and they had taken it, so that's not allowed. And that specific officer got charged with lying to the police as well. This was a pretty controversial incident, though, and after that, law enforcement seemed to like Tupac even less. And continuing in 1993, Tupac was helping Biggie to become a bigger artist. Obviously, there were multiple artists that looked up to Tupac, but he really took a liking to Biggie. And supposedly, one of the things that he claimed that he told Biggie as advice was to stop making music for men and start making music for women, because they're the ones that buy the albums and men just want to hear what women want to hear. Fantastic advice. And supposedly Biggie also wanted to be in Thug Life with Tupac, which was a group that he had formed and was working on an album with at that time, and we'll get into them in a second. At the same time, it was said that Biggie felt like things were not happening for him, they weren't taking off, and he was getting a little frustrated. And of course, Bad Boy Records hasn't even been open like a full year yet. So it makes sense that they're, not on perfectly solid footing, and Biggie was looking for a solid career. He also said in an interview that West Coast rap was blowing up at that point, and Biggie felt like the reason it was blowing up is because they were talking about real stuff, the hard stuff that needed to be talked about, and that's what he wanted to do. So apparently, Biggie asked Tupac to manage him instead of Puffy, aka P. Diddy, aka Sean Combs. But the story goes that Tupac told him no, and that he should definitely stay with Sean, and that it would all work out in the end. Around November of that year, Tupac is in New York filming for Above the Rim, and he starts hanging out with this guy who went by Haitian Jack, but we're gonna start calling him Jack. His real name is Jacques Agnant, and he said that he was studying him for his character in the movie. And Haitian Jack was definitely a high roller. He knew a ton of celebrities. He met him where he had a table and a bunch of bottles at a club. And Jack says that this is why Tupac liked him, because he was very respected, he knew a ton of people, he was in a lot of different circles. And his friends around him at the time said that he kind of took on some of Jack's nature. They did say that Tupac was always kind of a chameleon, which is very Gemini of him, but that he, around Haitian Jack, started to become more flashy, a little bit more arrogant, felt like nobody could touch him, he was too cool for school. But Biggie also knew Jack, as did many other people that Tupac knew, and supposedly they all told him to stay away from him and that he was not a good person. Then November 14th, 1993, Tupac and Haitian Jack are out at a nightclub and he meets Ayanna Jackson. She was 19 at the time, Tupac was 22. They met through a friend, they were hitting it off, they were dancing, they were doing stuff in the corner of the club, they went home and they hooked up. Now what happened 4 days later, on November 18th, there's two different accounts, and we'll go over both of them. We're going to start with Ayanna's. So she said that Tupac hit her up, and she went to the hotel again, but when she arrived, there were multiple other dudes there. There was Haitian Jack, his manager, a guy named Charles Fuller, Man, and another dude there. And at first, they were just watching TV together, and then Tupac took her back to his room in the suite because they wanted some alone time. However, she said after that, the other guys came into the bedroom and things started to go bad. Essentially, they all forced themselves upon her at that point. I cannot go into graphic details here. I will not go into graphic details here. If you want to know more about the exact events on her side, The New Yorker is the place to go. They have a whole article. And I did see some accounts where she said that Charles Fuller, Man, actually never touched her, but he was charged alongside them in the end. And apparently when she was leaving, Jack told her that she needed to calm down and he would hate to see what happened to Mike Tyson happen to Tupac. However, she did tell the hotel security, they called the police, and Jack, Tupac, and Charles Fuller, aka Man, all got arrested. And while they were arresting them, they also found 2 weapons in Tupac's room. So on his side, he claims that Nigel, the one who set them up, is also the one that called her that day and invited her over, and Tupac did not realize that she was coming for him. But then when she got there and he started to realize that that was the vibe, they went back to his room to do stuff. And then he said that after they'd been in there a while, the rest of the guys came in, and he said that they both, him and her, both froze and did not say anything. And he said that he didn't want to tell them to get out because he felt like that would be saying that she was his girl only and that he was staking a claim on her, that they were together, that kind of thing. At this point, he says that they started to touch her, he became uncomfortable and decided to leave the room. So he went out of the room, talked with Man and talked with his publicist, and then took a nap. He said when he woke up, his friends were over him saying that they were in trouble and that the police were coming. He says at this point she came out of the room and she was crying, and she said, "Why you let them do this to me? I came to see you and you let them do this to me." And then he told her to chill and said, "Stop yelling at me and looking at me all crazy." All right, go off. Gaslight the hell out of her then. He said at that point, she opened the door, said, "This is not the last time you're going to hear from me," and slammed it shut. And things just kept rolling on for Tupac. March 10th, 1994, he was sentenced to 15 days in jail for the assault on Alan Hughes, the Hughes brother. And yes, they did use the MTV footage in the trial. And after the trial, he said, as a message to his fans, kind of a warning, a 2.5-minute problem just cost me 15 days in jail. And I don't know if he was referring to the fight or saying it on national TV, but either way, yeah, probably not his best ideas yet. March 23rd, 1994, though, Tupac stars in Above the Rim, and this is the character that he was basing off of Haitian Jack. But then in April 1994, he has another legal issue. He gets stopped for speeding, and the police find a weapon in his car. Summer of 1994, though, a happy thing. He starts dating Keisha Morris. They met at a nightclub in New York. Now, I know that I said that he was dating Madonna previously, but they had broken up. I am not sure if there was overlap or not, because some sources say they dated for 18 months, some say just about a year, so it's unclear. And in Biggie's news, August 9th of 1994, he releases his single Juicy, and this single comes out under the name The Notorious B.I.G., even though he had been going by Biggie Smalls. So he had to change his name because Calvin Lockhart, an actor who played a character named Biggie Smalls in the 1975 movie Let's Do It Again, sued him. I am pretty sure that that is where he got the name Biggie Smalls originally. So Biggie is now going by Notorious B.I.G. because Calvin Lockhart sued him over the name. So he tells everyone, stop calling me Biggie, although we all still call him Biggie, clearly. Then in September of 1994, Biggie marries Faith Evans. And they met at a photo shoot for Biggie because they were both signed to Bad Boy Records. When they got married, they had not been dating, but had known each other a total of 8 days. But he said that they were in love. Of course, we do know, though, that down the line, he continues to see Lil' Kim off and on. So this is also going to be an off and on relationship more than a marriage. Then September 13th, 1994, Biggie releases the Ready to Die album. And to him, this was an album where he was venting, where he was talking about all the issues that were going on in his life. His friend had actually been shot right before they started working on this album. And he was also in that time period where he was doing everything he could to make this dream happen and to get himself off of the streets and get himself in a better situation. And I know that reading the title of this album, reading the lyrics, is really morbid and scary looking back and knowing what we know now. But at the time, he said he didn't want to die. Really, his point was that he felt like he would be better off gone than in his current situation. That was the theme he was trying to portray. And of course, this album was super successful. And once he started to get big, he started having his friend Damien tape his shows wherever they went. He wanted to know what did the crowd like the best. And he also wanted to get into other stuff, not just music. He wanted to be in acting. He wanted to be in fashion. He wanted to own his own record label. He had big dreams. The next day after Ready to Die was released, Tupac pleads guilty to the beating of the rapper with the bat at Michigan State. And they took it from a felony to a misdemeanor. And then September 26, 1994, Thug Life Volume 1 is released. And Thug Life was a group that Tupac had started. It was originally Stretch, Princess Mal, Psych, Macadocious, and the Rated R. But it ended up being Psych, Macadocious, the Rated R, and Mapreem, Tupac's stepbrother, on this album. And their idea behind it was that they would have a gang member on each album, and in that way they would help gang members to get off the street, get into music. And the specific gang member on this album was Psych. He was a known Crip. Along with that album, Tupac also got the tattoo, Thug Life. And his manager said about that tattoo, he saw that we never make it as black people unless we sell out. He was saying he never would. It has also been said, though, that Thug Life stands for the hate you give little infants, F's everybody, as a reference to the kind of treatment that black youths receive in America and the societal repercussions of that. So October 26, 1994, Tupac is sentenced to 10 days in jail for the Michigan State incident with the bat, and he also got some community service hours along with it. And in November of 1994, Tupac's SA case with Ayanna Jackson gets started. He was charged with, and this app is sensitive, so he was charged with SA, illegal weapons, and definitely something the app will not let me say, starts with an S, ends with automy. The app is mad. The story that police told, not saying that this is even Ayanna's story, but the story that police told was that Tupac let them R-word her as a reward. And of course, Tupac denied that. And Tupac and Charles Fuller, aka Man Man's case, were completely separated from Haitian Jack's because he didn't have any weapons charges. And Tupac found this suspicious because his lawyer found this suspicious. Supposedly, it's abnormal for cases like this to get separated in that way. After that, Tupac was out at a club with a friend and another dude who happened to be a reporter and ended up relaying their conversation. And apparently Tupac said that he thought Haitian Jack had set him up and was working with the cops, and that Mike Tyson had called Tupac from jail to say that Haitian Jack was bad news. And of course, Iona and Haitian Jack have both said that this is not true. He did say, though, after the trial one day that he did actually feel bad because he didn't protect her. He said, because I didn't want no harm done to me, I didn't say nothing. So basically, he was a silent bystander, and he was ashamed of that, which he should be. And unfortunately, all the legal fees of all of the stuff that we've talked about so far were really draining his bank account at this point. So November 30th, 1994, Tupac shows up at Quad Studios. And he was there because he said he had been offered $7,000 to be featured on a Lil Sean track. They were going to do that recording. And again, he needed the money because he had a ton of legal fees to pay, and he was also taking care of his family. He had 3 other guys with him at the time, one of them being Stretch. He said when they got into the lobby, there were 3 guys in there who were wearing army outfits, which is apparently a Brooklyn thing, so he assumed that they were with Biggie. He said, though, that none of them would look at him, which was a huge red flag in hindsight. At the time, he had been smoking, so it didn't completely register. One of Biggie's best friends, Lil Cease, yelled down at them from the stairs and said, "Hey, we're up here, Biggie's up here, Puff is up here," and asked him to come up, supposedly. So Tupac and his friends are about to get into the elevator. He said they pressed the elevator button, they turned around, and the guys in the lobby had pulled out weapons on them. They told them to get down on the floor, and all of the other guys got down on the floor, but apparently Tupac froze and decided to use his own weapon to try and get away. And in the end, he got robbed, he got beaten, he was shot, and then he played dead until they left. So Tupac claims that he was shot 5 times, including in the head and in the scrotum, but apparently there's other evidence that suggests that maybe he also accidentally shot himself. Either way, there's a bullet in this man. After he had pretended to be dead and they left, Tupac went up the elevator, which I feel like the hospital is the right answer to where do you go after you get shot, but he wanted to notify someone. He said that Puffy and Biggie looked really guilty when they saw him and that everyone else looked surprised to see him, even though they knew that he was in the lobby because he had rang the buzzer to get up, so like they didn't expect him to make it, essentially. So he started to think that maybe they all had something to do with it. On the other hand, a lot of people thought that Haitian Jack might have ordered it, a way of telling him after he was talking about him in the press to stay in line, but of course Haitian Jack denies that. And Biggie also said he had nothing to do with it, and that originally when he heard that Tupac was angry, he thought it was just some sort of like macho act for publicity, but when he found out that Tupac really did believe that he had done it, he was quite upset. Then December 1st, 1994, Tupac is given a guilty verdict in the Iona case. And yes, he did appear in court again after being shot, and yes, the jury was extremely confused. He was acquitted for the 2 other charges, the weapons charge and the other charge, starting with an S, but the SA charge, he was guilty. And according to a jury member, they said that they felt like the weapons were planted by the cops because the weapons they entered into evidence were a different color. Members of the jury did also say that for a while they were almost all in favor of acquitting him, but then they considered 4th degree SA, which is a lesser charge but still acknowledges involvement, but it ended up being 1st degree SA. And after the judge sentenced him, Tupac said, "I mean this with no disrespect, Judge. You never pay attention to me. You never looked in my eyes. I always felt you had something against me." He also did an interview outside the courthouse.
The way the world is today, a woman can say anything about a man and I'm guilty until proven. You know what I'm saying? It's like I don't even have a chance. Everybody already made me guilty.
It is at this time, before anybody comments, that I would like to bring up some statistics. Only 39% of SAs are ever actually reported, and there's only a 16.3% chance that somebody accused will end up in prison. But if you are a Black American, you are 3.5 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of SA. Just please only comment if you are going to listen and understand those statistics that I've just given you. If you're going to be respectful, no victim blaming, no victim shaming, no racism, no sexism, okay?